Hello there, and welcome to Talking Nerdy, the show where we take various story arcs and events from current comics and we cover them. I'm your host, Obi-Wan Jabroni. Now, today's story we will be covering Kang the Conqueror number 1 through 5. Written by Jackson Lanzig, with art by Carlos Magno and colors by Espen Grudengern. I don't know, sorry. Um, The man called Kang the Conqueror has been a pharaoh, a villain, a warlord of spaceways, and even on a rare occasion, a hero. Across all timelines, one fact seems absolute. Time means nothing to Kang the Conqueror, but what if that was a lie? With that, let's start talking nerdy. First up, we have Kang the Conqueror number 1. Now, we open in the far future, and we see a young Nathaniel Richards before he has become Kang, and he is sneaking and breaking into the ruins of Doctor Doom's library. And while doing so, we get an internal monologue saying, "A thousand years ago, Alexander the Great sat on the sage of the wide renown. There he learned the secrets that would shake him to his core. There were more worlds than this, said the sage. Their number is near infinite, and they spread across the cosmos beyond the reach of any man's senses. Alexander looked upon his own empire, from the rich Mediterranean to the steppes of Asia, from his heart in the cradle of the civilization to the farthest border, and his eyes filled with tears. Great Alexander, why do you weep? Asked the sage. You have every glory that mortal has ever known. It is not worthy of despair, replied Alexander, that there are an infinite number of worlds to conquer, and I cannot become the master of even one. My name is Nathaniel Richards. I was born in the 31st century. By the time I'd reached the age of 18, I had conquered nothing. My world was a utopia of pleasure and entertainment. My so-called betters called it post-sacredity, and I called it boring. A utopia, to be sure, where 10-year-olds could master advanced robotics, where a boy could have his throat cut by bullies and recover in the matter of months, as I recently had. But it was also a place where time seemed to have stopped. It was the end of history, a meaningless possession of tepid moments, a countdown to nothing. And so I began to see my time for what it truly was, a cage. And like anyone wise enough to see the locks that hold their prison shut, I devised an escape. I've the future I held no promise. So I had began to seek keys to the past. I knew that in the echoes of the ancestors lay answers to my every question. I knew that those embattled champions of the brutal past had fathomed questions that I, in my comfort, could never even think to ask. It had taken me almost 2 years of searching. I had thought nothing of nothing else. I forged a leisure pass. I rerouted security from the Eurasian industry fields, and I rode by shadow into a land once ruled by fists of iron and defended by delirious magic. I thought to find answers from the past. I was at least half right. The air itself was thick with history, the grandeur of hope, worn down by the ages like rocks in the desert wind. I'd never seen anything old with my own eyes before. It was beautiful, and I was a fool. But then again, so was he. And he starts skimming through some books when he is attacked by a Doombot. And it knocks him to the side, and before it can attack again, it hit him with a blast. He is hit from a blast from behind. And we see Kang walk through a portal and destroy the Doombot, and tosses him through a portal, another one. Nathaniel looks to him and demands to know who he is, and Kang removes his helmet and says, the question with 10,000 answers, the Conqueror, the Eternal, the God Pharaoh Rama-Tut, the Timekeeper Immortus. I have been them all, and I will be again, but there's only one answer that has ever truly mattered. In the end, I am Kang. And at the beginning, I was you. I was you, sorry. And he opens a portal next to him and says, through this doorway is an infinite number of times and worlds, eras that sing my name and praise, planets that worship me. But to earn those, I have known loss, defeat, frustration. I would save you that trauma and that time. Join me and own the mysteries of the cosmos. Join me and become. And he opens the portal, and they both step through and emerge into a prehistoric Earth. And Kang continues, saying, "It is exactly 1 year. This will be the impact point for the asteroid that caused the Cretaceous-Pelagius extinction. Consider it at a deadline. This is your first lesson, boy. Time means nothing to Kang." And from there, we get a montage of Kang and Nathaniel traveling various timelines and observing Kang's past. And as we do so, we get an internal monologue from Nathan saying, "Many of my memories are fogged by the ways of time, centuries of conflicting timelines playing tricks in my head. But I remember every one of those first days with perfect clarity. My lessons began with survival, strengthening my body and mind, and where I could not strengthen it myself, Kang did so for me. He showed me our life as a pharaoh of Egypt and taught me its lessons, and he laid bare the rule of time, which lit my mind ablaze. His lessons were brutal. I was proud when I overcame them, and I was proud of what we could build together. He taught me to shoot. He taught me to kill. He taught me that a plan, no matter how meticulous, only serves to make you weak. He forged me just as he promised. And as I was forged, so did I glimpse the flaws in the iron that made my teacher. Once he got so drunk he could barely stand, and he took me to a far-off world where he cried in the shadows as a woman died in front of us. He said one word and was silent for days. Renona. He made me promise, and terrified of Kang, I did. I forswore my heart, though it was a promise broken very quickly. Never love. And we switch back to prehistoric times, and Nathaniel is alone hunting a T-Rex, and he sees that it has a woman trapped in a cluster of vines, and he blasts the Rex in the head, killing it. He approaches the girl and stands in awe for a moment, and we get an internal monologue yet again, saying, "I would like to tell you that I hauled the prize of my glorious victory back to camp where I festered a dinosaur's steak and sharpened its teeth into knives. But the truth is, by the time the beast collapsed, I had forgotten it was there." There was only her then. My breath, which had come so surely and effortlessly every minute of my life prior, abandoned me, as did my ambition and insecurity and fear. What remained was sure supplication, joyous in its certainty to this moment in time. Her moment. In the antiseptic world in which I was raised, skin rarely touched skin, and after my injury, never, not in affection or otherwise. I wished for that moment that the feeling to stay forever. Such is the curse of time. The most profound of present moments rot into foolishness as they become the past. We ran together for what felt like hours until the valley revealed itself to us, another great wound in the earth. But the very opposite of Doomstat. This place was made too early to be touched by the folly of man, by the cruelty, by his ego. It was a refutation built on joy. Addie brought me before the elder, the one they called the lasting peace. I should have been fearful. Perhaps I was a sacrifice or a prisoner, a skin to decorate their walls, an outsider judge for the darkness that had made a core in his heart. They could see it, who I was, what I would become. I've no doubt of that. It was in the afterglow of their nightly celebration, with a sense of unknown pleasure dancing with the ashes of the bonfire in the night, that Addie told me the stories of her people, of the stars that fell from the endless sea above that made them, and the foretold star that would fall one day to unmake them. I asked her how her people would go on if they knew such certainty that would one day wipe clean from the slate of history. "Because there is no other way, Nathaniel," she whispered to me, because by firelight, "because that is the beauty of living. The sea is dark and cold, and none can survive it forever. None ever have, and none ever will. But for a moment, one shining moment, we find purchase and stand against the dark. This is where we live, in the space between the stars." And we switch to later again at Kang's base. And Nathaniel runs in and says, "You won't believe what I have found." Kang stands and turns to Nathaniel and says, "The space between the stars. It is you who are not awake, boy. You dream of naive dreams of heroes, the romance of Alexander, the purity of Steve Rogers. You will unlearn this sentimentality. Never disappear from my sights again. You will do as you are ordered. You will learn the lessons I teach and never disregard them. And above all else, you will wipe that pathetic paint off your face." And Nathaniel says no. Kang does not make requests, boys. You are here by my design and shall behave by my design. Your future lies in the balance. Heed me or be doomed to the life of failure and rotten toil and insignificance. And Kang slaps Nathaniel to the ground as he refuses to wipe the paint off again. And he grabs him and drags him through a portal that comes out on a ridge above the woman's village. Kang says, "You want to save them, and you won't save them, sorry." And he starts to blast and slaughter the entire village while Nathan stands by, unable to stop it. And we switch to months later, and Nathaniel watches Kang sleep, and he steals his suit and goes outside. And as he's doing so, we get yet another internal monologue saying, "It was then that I understood. Though I had crossed the fabric of space and time, I had never left my cage at all. It was then that I saw that the cage was Kang." And so, for the final months of the Cretaceous, I pretended to study that which Kang instructed, while secretly I studied the lock. How the mention of Renna might drive my drailer to drink. How a few herbs might intoxicate a glass of wine. How the armor that had opened the way might be mine to command. I'd rarely been as tempted as I was in that moment, to take the inevitable into my own hands, and his words echoed in my ear. Time would conquer my enemies. If only I could master it. I waited until the perfect time, the final night before the final day, and as in Kang instructed, I used everything I had been taught. I brought in the waist and hemmed the shoulders to fit my smaller frame. I hotwired the controls to work at my command, and for the first time, just as Kang had sworn, I became. And I felt what he had felt so many times before now for the first time, the cold rush of moments under my heel, the warm scent of years at my whim. And as a chorus of apex predators roared their final lament, I conquered. And then I turned and was conquered. And then in turn, was I conquered? Kang's damnable suit gave way, overtaxed and burned out like it was a long dead creator. And now I was a star falling from the sky, a single jump through time, as far forward as I could manage, as far from Kang as I could run. Based on the heat, I'd worried that I had landed on a lifeless time, or gone too far into the heat, dead of the universe. But of course, I had gone somewhere far worse. I had run from Kang's cage and arrived at Rama-Tut's empire. And he arrives through the portal and is instantly surrounded by Kang's ancient Egyptian army. And that ends this issue. Leading us to Kang the Conqueror #2. And we open in ancient Egypt, and Nathaniel starts to fight off the Pharaoh's guards. And we get an internal monologue as he does so. In the 95th year of the fourth dynasty, by the reckoning of the Old Kingdom, the Pharaoh Rama-Tut appeared from the heavens. He arrived on a wonder of stone and metal, and bearing the guise and shape of a Hormacot. Within a week, the Pharaoh had conquered all the lands of Egypt. The fourth dynasty ended, and so began the dynasty of Kang. His radiance was said to be unspeakable, his magics vast, blessed by all the gods. His will deadlier than any under the gaze of Ra. All this was said about the Pharaoh Rama-Tut because they had never seen her. Sorry, they had never seen her. And during the fight, the Moon Knight of this era appears and helps Nathaniel escape. They leave town, and Moon Knight tells him that he is a part of a prophecy to bring down this Pharaoh. And they enter a tomb, and Moon Knight removes their masks to reveal that she is Ravonna reincarnated. And we switch to see a montage of Nathaniel attacking the Pharaoh's forces and making his own suit, and an internal monologue at the same time of this saying, I do not believe in gods. In my conquest of shit. In my conquests, in my life of conquest, I have crushed countless divine skulls in my hands. But even before I had saw fear in the gods of the eyes of God of thunder, I knew better. And yet, in this place, my mind ran clear. Something ain't right here. I am so sorry. Okay, I lied. My mind ran clear. The past, the future, like a river of blood from my mind, the Kang's neurokinetic armor. Time and memory coursed hot through my veins. I swore that I would be the hero she saw in me. I swore to tear him down. In the shadow of a dead god, I took my revenge and cast it in iron. I had left the time of my birth to seek adventure, heroism, and glory like in the ancient days. And in the streets of ancient Memphis, I finally found it. I learned the way a laugh sounds when you know it might be the last, and how another's heartbeat feels in the face of certain death. I had sought rebellion, demanded escape, and found joy. Never love again, said Kang, lest you be conquered. But he knew nothing of love, I was sure. He was a creature of hate. When you are young, it is so hard to see that you are only born from the other, and that without love to inspire it, hate is only rage. Anger can be conquered by calm, and like its pathetic cousin regret, hatred just feeds. It makes one ruthless. It drives the preparation of armories and the shatterer of centuries. It intertwines with power like a parasite around the brain skin. Love makes one blind as hatred makes one see. And it is in that way that we fell under Rama-Tut's eye. And the Pharaoh's ship appears above the battlefield, and Nathaniel and Moon Knight are captured and presented before the Pharaoh himself. He ordered Moon Knight to be took to his pleasure gardens, and she breaks free and tries to attack him. Kang. He shoots her with his ray gun, and that enslaves her mind to do his will. Nathaniel screams no and reveals who he is to the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh stops and says, I don't know you. Know you. Are you a variant or a time yet to come? Nathaniel says that he should think before killing him, for it may be his own throat that shall be cut. The Pharaoh says, very well, and blasts Nathaniel with his ray gun, enslaving his mind to him as well. And we switch to the coming months. Nathaniel, now a thrall of the Pharaoh, leads his army against Apocalypse, and we get another internal monologue. My mind screamed. My heart bled. She could not fight. I did not scream. Whatever hope we had was unmade, and once again the tyrant Kang forged me in his image. And though me and the end of heroes is dead, for a while Rama-Tut considered himself a god king. He was no more than a man out of time. Even Koshonu was but a powerful dream. Despite Rama-Tut's posturing, Egypt was already blessed with a living god. His name was Ibn Sabanor, and his conquest would last millennium. It was then, in those ancient days, that I first knew war. I learned the way a scream sounds when it is somebody's last, and how fear alone can stop a heartbeat even before death. Love made me blind, and so I began to hate, and saw the only path forward. My body was a prison, my armor a cage. To escape Kang's power, both needed to be broken. And through the pain I swore, I will have my revenge on Kang. So it was that, in the fourth year of the Kang dynasty, heroes from another time fell from the skies to restore the ancient ways and ended the pretender's reign. With the days of Rama-Tut escaped into the time stream, his kingdom fell into chaos. In Sabanor took all he wished and burned the remains. No record of Renova remained. Like a footprint in the sands of a desert, she was scattered to time. I told myself a lie in those days. None are lost in the light of the moon. I knew better than to believe it. She was as dead as the god she served. But Kang was alive, no longer a pharaoh, but a warlord of the 31st century, soon to reappear in the 20th to make his first attempt at true conquest. Kang had drilled every detail of that attack into my mind, so that when I attempted it, I would succeed. Thus Kang had also crafted the weapon of his own destruction. If only I could cross the sands of time once more, I would not be Kang's conquest made manifest. I would not be his perfection. I would be his apocalypse. I would be his apocalypse, sorry. A beaten and bruised Nathaniel bows before Apocalypse and vows to help destroy Kang if they work together. And that ends this issue. Taking us to Kang the Conqueror #3. And we open in Apocalypse's fortress, and we see Nathaniel lying in an open sarcophagus with Apocalypse standing above him. And we learn that Nathaniel will be preserved and sealed into the sarcophagus to send him into the future point in time. Apocalypse uses his powers to seal the sarcophagus, and we get an internal monologue from Nathaniel saying, I did not understand. It was a lie I never understood. How far would have to go? Not until it was too late. For the sarcophagus was where Kang truly began. Time is a thing to be conquered. That was the edge of Kang's knife, not tactics, nor technology, nor superpowers, nor brutality. Time travel. But even without a machine, we all travel through time slowly and ever forward. So, with my flesh protected from the age of Apocalypse's arcane technology, by my mind restlessly awake, I did the one thing that Kang would find aberrant. I took the long way around. And all the while I sharpened my mind and steeled my focus. I had many coming victories to contemplate, but I was drawn particularly to the failures, the ones I had been trained to prevent. I contemplated Renova, and the mystery of her name echoing on my elder self's lips, and the meeting of my own Renova in the distant past. I shed my boyhood to make myself her murderer's undoing. And finally, in the shadow of 26,964 years of preparation, meditation, and patience, I arrived. And the sarcophagus is found by some locals, and Nathaniel is awoken. And we see him escape into hiding and prepare for Kang's arrival. We see reports on the news of the X-Men, Fantastic Four, Avengers, Spider-Man, and other heroes' first appearances and formations, and their battles, until Kang arrives to fight the Avengers. And oh, I'm sorry, I'm dropping stuff. Kang arrives to fight the Avengers, and we get an internal monologue as Nathan leaves his base and goes to the scene of the battle. The Avengers. Their names echoed in my head from years of study. Thor, Captain America, Iron Man, Giant Man, the Wasp. They looked bigger in my memory, such as too often the way with fools. They did not even notice the boy underfoot. They thought they could defeat Kang on the field, and though victory would soon be theirs, I knew the outcome. Kang would escape into time, for time was his weapon, and only through its clever application would he be surprised. So, as they fought him with hammer and shield, I approached not as Alexander, but as Odysseus. I made Kang's time ship know me as a friend, for none could access its arsenal but Kang. Perhaps, as I recall now, that moment was the first time I was truly him. For like Kang, I was so proud of my clever ambush, and like Kang, so unaware of the consequences, the fate I had chosen around myself. Not what scavengers I had attracted. And as Nathaniel boards Kang's ship in secret, Kang is forced to retreat from the Avengers. Sorry. and has his ship to do a time slip. Nathaniel approaches Kang with a gun drawn and says, "Run to run in time all you want, Kang. It won't save you from me." And Kang turns confused and asks how this could be. And Nathaniel and asks how this could be. Sorry, I lost my spot. Oh, okay. Sorry. Kang turns to confused to Nathaniel and asks how this could be. And Nathaniel says, "In the Old Kingdom, you captured a young rebel priestess. Her name was Renova. She died under your mind control, stripped of everything that gave her life. I loved her, and I am her avenger. Your time is done. I kill you, I erase from all time the conquest of Kang. I take this time ship back to the Old Kingdom where I replace you. I save Renova. I build your legacy in the ancient sands, and we live in unconquered life." And before he can shoot Kang, a portal opens next to them, and Doctor Doom walks through the portal and says, "How fitting, for as you will soon come to know, Kang means nothing to Doom. You'll forgive me if I forego a traditional monologue, as your many slights against Doom has yet to occur from either of your perspectives. I'm afraid my motives would be meaningless to you both, not to mention superfluous, since you will both soon be dead. Doom knows your identity, boy. This convergence of Kangs has created a perfect temporal location from which to burn your blight from history, root and branch. I once swore to destroy you, but it is through your own carelessness that you have made it so." And Kang interrupts and says, "Kang is the future," activating a voice command defense on his ship that starts to electrocute Doctor Doom. Nathaniel and Kang attack Doctor Doom together. And while this is happening, we get a monologue from Nathaniel. "When I was in school, my company was rarely enjoyed by others. My thirst for knowledge and relentless ambition did not breed popularity, which mattered nothing at all. My classmates were but children. Until that fateful day, just after my 16th birthday, they cornered me, those children, over some perceived slight. I never saw it coming. They hated me, but I didn't know their names. These boys from the schoolyard beat me. They broke me. They got close to me. And then they slit my throat. I spent a year in the hospital, an entire year, imagining what kind of man I would become. Victor Von Doom had been my inspiration to climb from my bed. Dubious ancestry or not, the reason I felt I could change the world. A man of legend, of power, someone I could aspire to one day become. Instead, I got Kang. We stood side by side, using our matching force field technology to freeze Doom in his steps. Side by side with a man who's as small as those boys who had hated me, who had cursed me rather than tried to understand. But this day, it was not the bully who held the knife." And together they send Doom back through a portal and close it. And Nathaniel instantly turns on Kang and says, "Doom was right about one thing. Your time is done." And he unloads his gun into Kang, and Kang falls to the ground dead. And we get a montage of the next few years and an internal monologue by Nathaniel saying, sorry. And it was, and in that way I was made free of Kang. I followed the ship's chronotic wake in order to reinsert myself into the timeline recent days before the original Rama-Tut's arrival. In ancient Egypt, I did exactly what I'd planned, replacing the Kang that was. And though I felt no joy for weeks after pulling that trigger, I tried to focus instead on purpose, on taking the empire that was promised, gaining the power that would save her life. As Rama-Tut, I would let Renona live, as Nathaniel couldn't. But when she saw me this time, she saw only the mask I wore. There was no time for plain speak. Apocalypse War was at my gates. So I gave her wrath in place of freedom. The Ultra Dion Ray would never be her fate again. Not so for my younger self to ensure the journey led inevitable to my own. I sent him to war and to glory. For her safety, I had Renova taken to the compound of my own creation, a hidden place where the violence of the world would pass her by. She would survive. I would find her in the aftermath. I had become Pharaoh for one purpose, and through mastery of time I had succeeded. And then the trap closed around me. I thought knowing the past would protect me from the present. So focused I was on Renova's salvation that I didn't see my fate as cemented. I thought I could prepare that the Ultra Dion and my legions would save me and I'd just become my own shortcut. I'd fail just as Kang had, exactly as he had, at the hands of the Fantastic Four. And so, like him, I ran, recklessly and without direction, and with no plan or planning. My own victim cast away from hope, into the darkest of futures, the wrecked atomic wasteland that lay 1,000 years behind my own fixed origin. I thought I knew what I would find there, a war-torn future to be conquered, the forge that truly made Kang. But once again, time held a surprise for me. For me, who had thought her conquered. And her name was Renova. And Nathaniel arrives, beaten and in retreat in a war-torn future, and is rescued from his crashed ship by Renona, reincarnated. And that ends this issue. Leading us to Kang the Conqueror number 4. Now, we open up in the year 4086. Renova helps Nathaniel to his feet, and he instantly raises a gun and shoots an incoming enemy behind her. They shake hands, and we get a montage of them killing armies and toppling tyrants through time. Nathaniel makes a move on Renova at some point, and she slams him to the ground and says, "No, you underestimate our technology. You understand our technologies in ways we can't imagine. Your view of history shadow stretches behind horizons, and all that power you use to claim me as you claimed this woman you love, except that she is not me, and I and I am not yours. I belong to myself, and the moment we've made shall be our last." And Nathaniel lays on the ground as Renova walks away. And he gets to his feet, and we get a montage of his continued conquest by himself, as well as an internal monologue. Never love, as if it were a choice. Fine. If the choice was to be mine between a heart pierced by her gaze and one hardened against her, then I would choose conquest. My army was unwashed, untrained, savage, and cruel, but one fact is true through time. Slaves will become slavers when given the chance to hold the whip. Renova was incorrect. My mind was my greatest tool. For the weapons of war left behind by those magic fools in her stories were made of the very technology I had trained to repair in those long lost listless childhood days. Complexity had worn on me. I wished for something simple, and so I offered all the simplest choice. Join me or die. Many chose death. I thought it would feel worse, that wearing his colors would feel like heresy. But after years of losing, victory was intoxicating. To conquer, a phase I had spent many nights thinking on, not to pillage or to raid or to take ownership of, to control. And I realized why my heart felt so full. I had never felt control in my entire life. And now that it was mine, I would never let it go. The machine was an ancient one, and even so, I knew it from the tales of he who trained me. A neurokinetic armory. How he had first forged his armor in that burned out land, the heart of his time ship. But this was not his. It never has been. It was mine for the first time. I belonged to myself. My 100-year conquest had begun. What had once seemed so distant, so exoteric, so impossibly vast was now within reach. I needed only wait and watch the 40th century fall before me. But I was not a man of patience, and with my time ship reforged, all of reality awaited my rule. Should I have sat surrounded by the ghost of lost love, pondering how I might learn from them, or indulge my glory across the fabric of space-time? To Nathaniel, it may have been a quandary. To Kang, it was no choice at all. The ground the king of the past to dust, Arthur most of all. His cries were not those of a hero, but of a child who thought destiny could not be swayed against him. The Cosmarian monarchs believed themselves safe in their quantum dimension. I showed them the error of their ways, then blessed their endless cities by reforging them as factories for my own spanning time war. At the end of time, I met a man who claimed to have once been Kang. He had Nathaniel's weakness, but none of Kang's resolve. He was a sick old man, kept alive by alien magic, no true challenge. In all of time and space, this refrain repeated again and again. No true challenge, only conquest, but never glory. And so, I returned to the end of my beginnings, 99 years after I had departed. A time and place where my name rang through every heart and mind that lived. The very visage was synonymous with godhood. There I stood forth to finish my first conquest. My horde had spent a century taking every corner of this desolate world, but I had been thwarted by the actions of a single realm, one holdout for my planetary rule. I came to do what the fool Alexander could not, in the hope, in the hope it would make me feel something, anything. But in the shadow of that great castle, and not for the last time, it was Kang who was the fool. It was her again. A different face, but those same eyes, the same soul. It was her. The one he'd lost. The one somehow, and now, somehow, the one I'd found. I knew this story all too well. Kang had told it to me many times when he was far too drunk. The woman had hated him, dead at a traitor's hand before he'd won her love. I had molted to fix his mistake, and so for the first time since the dawn of time, I did as I was told. It was for this purpose I constructed the Omni-Viewer, to see all of time that I might unravel the puzzles of Renova. The rabble demanded yet more conquest. They could not understand the cosmic significance of this paradox. A girl in ancient Egypt looked like the eyes of fire. The warrior woman in the rubble looked to me in the eyes with eyes of ice. They are the same eyes again and again, always fleeting. They are the only thing in all of time and space that I desire. So I resolved to win her love, not through conquest, but through its opposite. I freed her kingdom of my grid despite my ejections of my general. The ice begins to thaw. The traitor Baltog is brought into the open before he can kill her. I stand with heroes. I become a hero, and she sees me for who I am. I prepare to end Baltog as Kang never had, but for a moment I stay my hand, for I have fallen in love, and it has not conquered me. It is my mercy she has grown to love. I win, and time laughs. And time laughs. And the traitor shoots Renova and kills her, and Nathaniel holds her body in his arms and weeps with fury that he could not save his love yet again. And we switch to later on Nathaniel's ship. He stands over her Renova's body that he has put into a tubed machine, and as he activates the machine, he talks to her, saying, "A villain could not give her love, and a hero could not save your life. The cage was Kang, and in trying to escape it, I had forged its bars myself. And so, it was then that I devised a new escape, my love. One the old man could never accomplish, one that I already know I will. I spend the next 50 years mourning you, trying to bring you, his Renova back. But I had seen your face in the distant past, and I had seen your face only 100 years ago, and I see you here now. Never love. It was the only way you will be conquered." That's what he told me. I had already seen the ripples in the waters of time, but I remained so ignorant to the impacts that caused them. But I know now for what else could be. I am the impact, and I shall shatter time for you. Awaken, Renova. Awaken 1,000 times, and be saved by my final conquest. And that ends this issue. Taking us to our final issue, Kang the Conqueror #5. And we open at the end of time on Nathaniel's ship, and he activates the machine Renova is lying in, and we get an internal monologue as the flash starts. The sea is dark and cold. None can survive it forever. But for a moment, one shining moment, we find purchase and stand against the dark. I call this place Chronopolis. This is where we will live, Renona. Where you'll live, I swear it, even if it takes 1,000 attempts. She was not you. But she had wisdom. Go, mine Renova, and be infinitely reborn. In the space between the stars. In those moments of mastery, I had become the master of time. I often thought this epochs and eras were measurements for lesser men, but they had not invented the chronology that could contain Kang. I brought to Chronopolis the greatest monks of the Buddha and the most enlightened Shi'ar warrior priests, and through their teachings and on rare occasion over their corpses, I came to an understanding. A master does not allow his love to die. Those are the actions of a boy. The master compels that which he controls to become which he loves. Using every bit of Chronopolis's power, I unraveled the very fabric of time. I found the threads of fate and made the city its loom. And from it, I wove a machine of constant replication. I injected Renona Renslayer's very soul into time, like a dye into the threads of an entire tapestry where time had taken her from me. I forced time to do the opposite, the birth of infinite Renovas in infinite timelines, giving myself infinite chances to save her. The plan was genius. It was flawless until it actually began. 1347. Renova is touched by the plague before I arrive. Paradox prevents me from looping the event. She runs in horror, afraid I am the Reaper. The year 4000. Renova rejects Kang. I am once again taken by surprise. 5323. Renova is the Overmind's greatest champion. I track her across the stars. In the moment of seeing eyes on her, she is gone. 4998. The events is involatile. I swear to investigate further, but I do not. 3124-8. Renova defects to my elderly variant. I have never considered the interference of Kangs in other old temporal positions. I hope it is not a limited phenomenon. 2001. It is not. 2920. I am nearly killed attempting to stand against Apocalypse. Renova dies anyway. It matters not. I realize later that she only loves Nathaniel. 3423. I encounter Renova with her own mastery of time. It goes badly. 2027. I begin to comprehend my failure, but I do not yet understand it. 7634. Far beyond the end of man, where there is nothing to conquer but the great machine. Even there, Renova is born, and because she is spectacular, she survives. I felt hope in that moment. It was the last time. And then I heard her voice from behind me. And he turns to see Renova standing behind him moments after he pulls the lever on the machine and sees all the times take place. She attacks him and screams, "How dare you? You made me believe you were a good man, and then you stole my entire life." He tries to reason with her with no luck, and he sighs and shoots her, saying, "Another failed attempt." And as her body falls to the ground, it starts to glow, and she explodes in a blast of energy. And at the same time, we get another internal monologue. I do not remember these moments well. I think I do not want to remember the screams. And of course, time was collapsing. The end of my rescue operation was much closer than I imagined. So the mind, as it often does while exposed to the time stream, plays tricks. It erases, efficiently redacts, and kindly revises. But I can still remember her smile and the terror it inspired. The ashes of Chronopolis are there if you look for them, no matter what your temporal position. A bit of dirt on your mantle, a penny from the distant year, a book you swear you've read. Chronopolis exploded into time, but Kang fell. I thought it an escape when I leapt blindly into time, but I was tossed to her seat. I peered to a foe. I dreamed of a conquest. I failed and fell back into time. Of this time, I remember little but rage. It is when the drinking began. I flirted with self-annihilation, but Immortus' existence assured that any success through suicide would be short-lived. Time had learned of the virus that was Kang. She was inoculating herself against me, and so I had only one option. And when it came to me, it was as if I had never thought of it before. I laughed. Then I realized what it meant. I thought hard about that day, that place, that all-important moment, and I arrived 10 minutes early. He was younger than I remembered. Nathaniel Richards' eyes I remembered as once my own. I had felt so powerful, so capable. I'd looked at Kang with disdain. A sneer, the sneer was insufferable. I swore to erase it from the boy. I gave him a chance I'd been given by the monster who made me. But with the benefit of my knowledge, I would save him the trauma. I would do it right and become. I remember the wood under my fingers, the betrayer's tears that leapt unbidden into my eyes as he slapped me down, telling me to remove the face paint. Did his mouth taste of bile while I lay bleeding? Did he shiver and sweat? Did he feel the noose tighten around his throat? In an inescapable moment, a broken heart, hate, fury so hot it will burn the stars. What had been was again the lesson he needed, the one that in my fury I torched, was forced to teach as I slaughtered Renova and all of her village in the prehistoric era. A lesson, one last chance to save her. I had been given one last chance, and I'd done only what time demanded. I was no master. I was a boy. It made me hate him more than the all. She knew me, even from the stars, and I danced with Addie. She knew. She knew me for what I am. But all I wanted was to be more than Nathaniel Richards. He left that night, in the night, stealing only time armor he thought I owned. And Nathaniel gets out of, Kang gets out of bed as the young Nathaniel leaves, and he puts on a spare suit. He walks outside as the asteroid falls towards Earth and steps through a portal to the end of time, where we get another internal monologue. Run, Nathaniel. Run and become. You think me conquered? But it is not Kang who has died this day, for Nathaniel Richards is not a boy, nor a man, nor a hero, nor a villain. He is only a beginning. A king and a tyrant, a villain and a hero. We will be all things, experience all things, the beginning and ending of our time, and ours by immortality's boon. You will have the power of a god, and when you have lived an immortal's life, still here you will stand. Never love. How could I? When there is no one left to love, across all of time, my Renovas are gone, my past asphyxiated, its loop completed. Her grip upon my heart releases, and so the husk stops. I found my dissection. Let Armageddon be a funeral pyre. But there is no one that escapes from eternity's trap, and I stand upon its precipice. I need not even jump. I need merely to rest, to finally rest. Alexander wept because he could not conquer his world. Alexander wept because he could not conquer himself. But I am not Alexander. I am not Alexander. Rest in fire, Nathaniel Richards. Rest knowing you have bested all you thought to be great in the world. Die knowing you stand astride destiny. Give your face and voice to he who you created, and who in turn created you. And above all things, through all of time and space, may conspire to defeat you. Never, ever love. And he sits in a lone throne in the void of the end of time and stares into the distance. And that ends our story. Sorry, we have a guest for the outro here. He wouldn't leave me alone for a minute. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Join us next week as we cover sword number 8 through 11. Thanks for watching. As always, remember to like, subscribe, and share our video to help spread the brand through the world. Also, leave a comment down below. Feedback is always welcome. Now, you can also find us on the Jabroni Nerd Facebook page as well as YouTube. So, until next week, guys, keep talking nerdy. Say bye, Bubby. Say bye. No, okay, I tried. Keep talking nerdy, guys.